So what's the dragon fruit story?
All right, well, we got the biggest score of dragon fruit ever in this truck that we're borrowing right now. And basically what happened is I was reading Paul Thompson's book, and he talks about George Emerich Jr., who gave Paul Thompson his first hybrid seedlings, but they died in the frost. So anyways, I started Googling George Emerich Jr. and dragon fruit, and I came across a blog with all of this rare fruit. And sad to say, George Emerich Jr. died in 2017 suddenly. And as it turns out, I found two of his friends that happened to collect every cutting of his dragon fruit after he passed from his farm.
Yeah.
So we literally have a truckload of dragon fruit, 3 years old. It's all unknown, but it's all from George's farm.
Yeah, he was claiming that he got cuttings from every single dragon fruit specimen that he had.
Yep.
And so you don't know like exactly what's doubled up, but he's claiming he has like 30 to 40 different dragon fruit.
Yes, I don't even know it. I can't even believe how many cuttings we have in this truck and the size of them. We were able to pull them all apart without having any break.
Yeah, very little breakage.
So some are probably about 10 to 12 feet long, and I can't wait to get them out of this truck and show them to you guys. So I'm pretty excited, and we are going to be caretaking George Emerich Jr.'s varieties after he passed. So to me, it's kind of a pretty special and honorable thing to do. So I'm pretty stoked.
Yeah, you'll put them on proper trellises and.
Yeah, we gotta. They've been kind of just sitting there in pots for 3 years, and they need some TLC, but they're very, very healthy overall. And they lived along the coast for 3 years or so.
Yeah, well, when we get them out of the truck, we'll give them a shot, see what you have.
I don't even know what we have. It's exciting to take them out and try to figure it out, though. Oh man, this is going to be some fun, exciting work. So my strategy is going to be to pull them out and intact if possible, and then I'm going to divide them up and kind of categorize them by similar traits, and then I'm going to have to repot them with new fresh potting soil, and I'm going to label them GE1 through whatever I have here. So I'm very excited. I know there's red fleshed polyrhizis. I know that there are some hybrids in here, and I know that there are some undatus varieties, and definitely some Ocamponus. We have some bluish green dragon fruit varieties as well. So I am extremely excited. Let me pull them out for you and assess them and see what we have. All right, the lighting's not too good, but I have them in this part sun environment, so I can start getting to work pruning them and trellising them and figuring out what on earth I have. So I'm gonna have to come up with a naming convention on these, because officially they're all unknown for now, and some I may never figure out what variety they are. But there are 47 different pots of cuttings from George Emerich Jr.'s farm, and I feel extremely lucky to have all these, and hopefully I could get some to fruit or flower this year if they get some nice high quality soil. We'll see, especially the ones over here. Some of them are about 12 to 15 feet long. They're really, really long. We were able to keep them intact, but man, I have a lot of trellising to do. So we'll get to work on these and give you an update on them soon. So give us a like and a subscribe, and if you know anything about the late George Emerich Jr., I would appreciate some information on him, because I have so many of his plants now. I'm exhausted. It's been a long day, but we got one up. So one down and 46 to go. Now this is our new trellis. I call this the palm tree trellis. I think you can see why. But man, talk about a huge cutting. So I think, well, I'm pretty sure this is red flesh. Most likely Hylocereus polyrhizis, but we'll see. Time will tell. Hey everybody, this is Paul, and let's do about a 3-week update on George Emerich Jr.'s plants. You can see we got a flower bud there, and we ended up getting 49 of them. One was an epiphyllum. I'll show you that at the end. and many are bouncing back already. So I have some that I think are whites or pinks or hybrids here, and they're getting quite a bit of shade, and you saw that flower bud, it's happy. And then in addition, these are the ones that I needed to cut out the rot on the stem so they get a bit more shade. And these ones are probably the ones that need the most attention. I'm just keeping an eye on them, making sure nothing happens, and they're doing great so far. Now, I think these are Hylocereus polyrhizis, but they're a bit more sensitive than Orahona. So this one, for example, looks a lot like Orahona to me, but it definitely can't take the sun as much as Orahona. And there are some slight differences, so I'm excited to see what kind of DNA Mr. Emerich Jr. had. All right, let me show you some more. So lovely epiphytic roots. Lots of them are shooting out of this plant. So that's a great sign. But I do not see any flower buds on this large plant yet. Now in addition, there are several more cuttings of Georges. Here's 4 more. And these seem to be a bit more sensitive to our climate. So I give them about shade until about 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, and then they get the afternoon sunlight. And they seem to be doing fine with lots of plumping up and some new growth, so that's great. So another little flower bud, look at that. And here's 2 more Hylocereus polyrhizis, I'd guess. And they're quite large, but they still got a little bit of sun damage, more than I thought. So they're getting some shade in the morning. I think that's been most beneficial for these plants. Now in addition, here's some more. And they're all just bouncing back, starting to look a lot more green, a lot more healthy, and some new growth, as you can see here. See it? That's a very interesting one. All right, believe it or not, there are some more of George's cutting. Let me go show them to you. Here are some more. And this one was the first one to shoot some new growth here. See it? It's very interesting and healthy. A little bit scaly on the top, which I find very interesting. So you can see George Emerich Jr. number 49 is definitely not dragon fruit. It's an epiphyllum, 2-sided. So I'm excited to see what color flower this is. It's definitely unique looking, and it's already bouncing back. In addition, I had some very, very long cuttings, and you can see here that this one I had no other choice but to kind of put it over these rocks and through this king palm. And we'll see how it does. Now look at the stem here. Let's see if I can get close. There we go. Definitely a very unique looking dragon fruit plant. And definitely cannot be vertical on a trellis. So this one is just gonna crawl. It's born to crawl. So here's a few more under my Vivax bamboo. And I figured this would be a really easy way to let them grow and to assess them. So you can see here's some new growth on this one, which is great. But they just get a part sun. They lean up on the bamboo here, which is pretty sturdy. And they have a dripper. So I can just sort of leave them here and give them some time. And we'll see. Hopefully we'll get some more flowers in the future this season, so you can start tasting some of George Emerich Jr.'s amazing plants. Good morning, and today we're going to give you a 2-month update on George Emerich Jr.'s plants that we've acquired. We have 49 of them, and you can see a few of them are starting to bloom. Now, the last heat wave, most of the flower buds aborted, but there are 2 on Mr. Emerich Jr.'s plant number 2. So we do have several more here. Let me pan down for you. You can see they're all getting some great growth. And I definitely think there is some overlap of varieties, although there are some really unique ones like this one. So I was reading more into Paul Thompson's book because I've learned that most likely these were shared with George Emerich Sr. and Paul Thompson. They all kind of shared material, so this is definitely, some of the varieties are in Paul Thompson's book. I just have to match them up, and luckily he provided some with flowers and fruit, which I'll show you some pictures of in a little bit. Look at this one though, it's definitely different growth. So we'll see, time will tell, but it's nice to have them all potted up and doing well. All 49. This one's doing great. And then there's definitely some more like Hilo Series Polyrhizis, but this one's definitely a small cutting but different. It's got more color kind of on the ribs than the other ones. So that's definitely an exciting one. This is number 16. All right, let me go show you some more. I was a little worried about some of them, like this one's number 2. You could see how skinny that growth was, but it shot out a lot of new growth. So especially some of these really large pieces that I was able to keep together without having to break apart. You can see this is all one 3-year-old cutting. It's just awesome. Now this one does not have any fruit, or flowers I should say, but it definitely has a whole lot of new growth. Lots of epiphytic roots. It's just gonna kind of wrap around this whole entire tree in no time. You can see I expect fruit from this one next season. So this is some new growth in just 2 months. And these seem really happy being under this California pepper tree. I just don't want to leave them here too long so they get attached to the fence. But they all seem really, really happy just in this sort of lighting. They're doing really great. You can see how beautiful George Emerich Jr. number 9, this flower bud is. It's very, very purple. Seems like it may just stick around to set fruit. So time will tell. But we have probably about 10 or 15 plants that look very similar to this one. So I'll show you a few more of them. They do have some subtle differences as well, so time will tell. But I don't think we're gonna get very many fruit this year. I'm spending a lot of time and energy rooting and plumping up. They're very beautiful, so I'm excited. I think they're gonna be some high quality plants in here and old school DNA. Now, I did find one thing interesting I'm gonna show you. So I find these two very interesting. I think they may be the same. And I believe they might be something called Panama. And you can see in Paul Thompson, he describes them in his book, or shows pictures of the flower and the fruit. And he describes it as very similar to what this looks like. Horny, which is the edge is kind of that woody. The spines are small and dark. And the color is definitely more like an olive green, especially in the full sun, with like a bluish tint. It's very interesting, especially kind of as you turn it in the light. So I put these in the greenhouse, and I'm hoping to see some new growth. And if the new growth is bronze, then this is most likely going to be the variety called Panama. Now this one seems a lot happier, but no new growth. These plants seem really slow to grow too, because these cuttings are 3 years old, and you can see they're the smallest of any of George Emerich Jr.'s cuttings. All right, beautiful morning here, and today you can see the first flower from George Emerich Jr.'s plants, and this is number 9. So it definitely looks like a red-fleshed fruit that will set if I was able to cross-pollinate it successfully, as you can see. And I also did collect some pollen. So it's a very beautiful, very large flower. I find it extremely unique. And so do the ants. You can see the ants really enjoy being on this thing. But I don't really see any damage. Maybe a little bit of damage up here. So we'll see. I hope it sets fruit. It's definitely a stunning flower. Look at that. It's probably about 15 to 18 inches across. And what's unique is this plant definitely looks kind of like a Hylocereus polyrhizis to me. But I have a lot of them, and there's a lot of variability. So I'll have to see what becomes of it in the future. So let me give you one more look at the flower and then show you some bad news with George Emerich Jr.'s plants. And there's the bad news. You can see that those two aborted, both of them, most likely from the heat wave. So time will tell. Bummer. May have to wait for next season on this dragon fruit plant to unlock some more of its secrets.
Hey everybody, this is Paul, and I'm excited to share some of George's plants with you and show you the updates. Like, look at all of the polyrhizis that I've gotten from him. I think some are repeats, but I mean, look at this one. I don't even know how to really trellis this one. I'll just kind of let it grow along the fence or something.
It's bushing out.
Yeah, I mean, look at the growth. It's insane.
And it seems to be like almost like it doesn't need any support.
Yes, so far, I mean, it will pretty soon, but it was just the big thick nub before.
Right.
And this is definitely not Orahona. It cannot take the same amount of sun. And I did have my friend Linda, and we'll show you the fruit here. You can see it, that she actually grew his polyrhizis about 10 years ago. And it did produce a fruit, and it looks different, as you can see. So I'm hoping that this fruit will be very similar. This is the only one that set fruit. This is number 9, and it's definitely a polyrhizis, but it does have some unique traits. It's not Orahona, the shape is different, and it was a very different kind of whitish color. So I'm excited to see how dark the flesh will be on this when it's ripe. Now, in addition, I am noticing that I think he's hybridized some of his dragon fruit. So I did talk to the California rare fruit grower on Facebook's Messenger, and he said that he remembered that Paul Thompson and George Emerich Jr. had a competition with dragon fruit, so something regarding hybrids. So once he told me that, I kind of really spent some time staring at these, and again, you see that this is a polyrhizis very similar to the other ones I showed you. But then I noticed I think he's created some of his own hybrids off of this polyrhizis. You can see the growth is much different on this one, and it's a little less spiny. And let me show you over here as well. You can see that that growth is definitely different compared to the other polyrhizis varieties. There's more fine hairs, it's flatter. So I'm hoping that this could be maybe his polyrhizis crossed with his sweet undatus, if I'm lucky. So we'll see. Time's gonna tell.
You need fruit.
Yeah, you gotta have fruit and flower to prove it. But you can see that they are just aggressive growers in a part sun environment.
How big was that one when you got it?
This plant, all of this growth is new, so it was up to here.
Dang.
And there's some new branches down there. But honestly, I have so many, I'm just letting them grow, and we'll evaluate them as they produce fruit. I'm gonna trellis some, so let's show you kind of the next phase up the hill. So this section is more of what I think are George's whites and or his hybrids. You can see some have grown taller than me already since we picked them up back in, I believe, June. And you can see the ones on the palm tree trellis are doing great as well. Now, once I learned a bit more about George Emerich, it's actually Emerich Jr. because it's German, I didn't know that. I learned that he was good friends with Paul Thompson, and they actually, George Emerich Sr. carpooled with them to the rare fruit growers meetings. Now, what I found really interesting in Paul Thompson's book is that he describes some dwarf growing varieties of dragon fruit. And I'm really thinking that these could very much well be what he's describing.
Like short segments?
Yeah, you can see how every segment is so short on this plant. and you can see even the new growth is still short. This piece is already has a new branch. So I'm not very familiar, but I do recall in Paul Thompson's book, he talks about a few varieties that are considered dwarf growers. So I'm hoping that I have some of Paul Thompson's unknown varieties in this collection, but again, time will tell. But you can see that these two are definitely growing differently than some of the other whites in the collection of George's plants, which are 48 dragon fruit and 1 epiphyllum. Now there is one that I left some rot on, and I want to show you that right now, so let's go see what I have to do next. So out of the 48 plants, there were about 10 or 15 that had this problem here, you can see. So at the stem, it had rotted because the cuttings were stuck all the way down to the bottom of the pot. In other words, they planted the cuttings all the way to the bottom.
Like it went too deep?
Yeah, so watch, I'll show you. So I was trying this one out just to see how the growth was. This piece was actually damaged, but you can see it's only grown really slow compared to the rest. So what I personally do is I find that plants that have this rot at the stem or at the base just don't grow as vigorously. So I like to remove it. So what I'm gonna do for this plant, which is George Emerich number 39, I'm gonna cut it just like that. Now actually I can remove the whole thing. So let's put this on the ground, Scott. So you can see that now I'm gonna take this and put it as a cutting. I'm gonna save this whole thing. I was able to do it to all of these plants over here. You can pan out, Scott. All of those had the same problem. So let me kind of show you what that problem is exactly, so you can know why it's bad. Let me pull up that root ball and I'll show you. So it does root well, but if you look, you can kind of see what happens when you plant your cuttings too deep. It did root better than I thought, so I will say that. But again, I just have no desire to have any rot. It tends to grow with the cold weather.
It's just the cadmium layer is going to go so deep that it rotted all the flesh off.
Yep.
And then it's just sitting there
And it
exposed.
will heal and callus and grow normal eventually. But I just like to eliminate this step and have it re-root. It tends to re-root really quickly. But in this case, you can see it wasn't as deep. Some of the cuttings that I received had rot about that far. So this one in this case wasn't as bad. That's why I left it alone.
And it's rot that you can't see because of the dirt.
Yeah, it's all under the dirt, but then in my experience during the cold weather, it will expand. In other words, it stopped here, you can see, but in my experience, the cold weather, with the frost, it will creep up and expand. So I like to have a brand new kind of flesh to stem cut. And like you can see, I'll show you.
It's like an infection.
Yeah. And so as you can see, like on this one, had the same problem, and it's already rooted. It's in there really thick. And these really mature cuttings, as long as you leave them in dry soil, they'll root rather quickly. Whoops. So I'm gonna put this one in really dry soil tomorrow, back into its proper pot, and I'll leave it in the shade for about 2 weeks, and I won't water it. I'll make sure it stays dry, and it will most likely grow roots. Now the reason why I did this today is because it's the end of season in Southern California. It's starting to get cold. And in my experience, some dragon fruit will not root in the cold weather. So, let me show you, one more update on George's plants, and let's go into the greenhouse to go check out possibly Panama. All right, so here are a few really interesting varieties from George Emerich's collection, and this is number 3 and 15. And I'm starting to really think that these are most likely a variety Paul Thompson called Panama, because they have this bluish color. I don't know if you can see it here. Bluish tint, and they're really horny here on the edges, and their spines are not very large. Now you can see this one, it had rot really bad, like the last plant. You can see it's re-rooted really well. This one did not have rot, and it's been in the greenhouse this whole season, and look, no new growth. So it's definitely thicker, it's getting nutrients, but I was shocked to not see any new growth. So as a result, I took a cutting and gave it to a friend to try out. And I also grafted a piece here because I'm looking for bronze colored growth. One of the unique traits of this plant is it will produce a bronze color branch when it's a new growth. So I'm hoping that this successful union will show some new growth this season before winter hits in Southern California. So maybe we can kind of get closer to confirmation that this is or is not Panama. But either way, this is a very unique blue, and it's different than the variety Broxensis Blue. It's definitely a different type of dragon fruit. So there you go. There is an update on most of George's plants. So give us a like and a subscribe, and we'll keep them coming. And hopefully we'll get to taste that fruit really soon for you, and we can cut it open and see what it looks like.
Good morning, this is Paul, and check it out. George Emerich Jr.'s Hylocereus polyrhizis, at least one of them. The fruit is ready. It's on day 60, and it's December 1st, so it didn't really turn its full color. It should probably turn more red in the summer. But you can see it's stunning, it's beautiful, and I'm excited to try it. So it's a little bit loose, but the problem is after day 60, you can get, the seeds will start sprouting. If you go too much farther out, they'll start sprouting in the fruit, and the quality of the fruit will go down, or it just won't taste as good. So I'm excited to go try this for you today. And why is it special? Well, as you can see here, I read in Paul Thompson's book and online that George Emerich Jr. gave Paul Thompson his first hybrid seedlings, but they died in the frost at Paul Thompson's house. And I learned from California rare fruit growers that Paul Thompson and George Emerich Jr. had a competition with dragon fruit hybrids. So I'm excited to see what his other varieties will become, because we have 48 of them. Here's just a few. Look at this one. Interesting short segments. So, in addition, Paul Thompson and George Emerich Sr., George Emerich Jr.'s dad, they were best friends. So George Sr. and Paul Thompson would carpool everywhere to the meetings and stuff. So I know that I have a lot of old DNA from Mr. Emerich. So let's give it a shot. Let's give it a cut and put it in the fridge for the day and see what it tastes like. So here it is. It's really beautiful. I like the colors, but I expect it to be more red next season, because this is a fall or winter fruit. Now, it's only 197 grams, which is going to be 0.4 pounds. So 434 thousandths of a pound. All right, well, that's exciting. And let's go ahead and cut it and see what it looks like. Now, some of George's were dark red, and this one is actually purple. Very interesting. Not what I expected. This is much more purple than what I thought it would be. It could be due to the season, but this is definitely something interesting. So, wow, George, what were you up to? What a beautiful fruit. You can see the color on the blade. It's a good way to see a better indication of what the actual flesh looks like. So it's this shade of purple, and it's really stunning. Wow, that's definitely not what I expected. So hopefully in the future I can get some bigger fruit. Now I gotta get the brick score going here. So let me go ahead and put these here for you so you could enjoy looking at them. And let me zero this out. I really do like this. Oops, I didn't do it right. I should know how to do it by now. Let me zero it out. There we go. Dry it. Okay, this is going to be exciting for me because one, this was thought was going to be a red fleshed fruit, and that's not red. I would call this purple. Wow, tangy, probably because it's a winter fruit, but a nice little balance of sweet. Now in the case of that, you saw it, I got some water in that, so that's no good. So I'm gonna do this piece now. Now luckily none of the seeds sprouted after 60 days on the vine. See,
Luckily that didn't happen. All right, let's see the grand test. Now, I think it's gonna bricks higher eventually, being that it was just on a 4-foot plant. Oh my gosh. Get a little more, I'll try this other. They have a backup pipette. There we go. Okay. So only a 12.8, but again, this is on a 4-foot plant, and it's December 1st. But I'm excited to see what this does next season. I really like it. It's complex. The seeds aren't too large. They're a nice size. But this fruit definitely has potential. But again, I did not expect a purple flesh. I thought I would have bet money this is red. So I'll have to do some research on this plant more. But if anybody has a purple fleshed polyrhizis that looks similar to this, well, I would appreciate any comments below. This is really good. I can't wait until I have a mature plant that produces a large, high quality fruit, hopefully next season. But there it is, George Emerich Senior's fruit. Definitely much more purple fleshed than I thought. And it's really balanced. I mean, for only brixing at under 13. Oops, that was worthless. But for only brixing under 13, I gotta say, this is pretty tasty. So there it is. I hope you can see it's much more purple fleshed, almost like a Sunta 4. Maybe not quite that light color purple, but this is much more purple than I would have guessed. So exciting. I'm stoked as always. Any dragon fruit is good dragon fruit, in my opinion, especially when you grow them yourself. So there it is, George Emerich Junior's fruit. First of the season from a cutting that I got 4 months ago. Okay, so here is some of the research that I've found so far. This is actually probably the best research I've found. And this is from the hard work they've done in Israel for the past, I think, 3 decades now with Hylocereus and dragon fruit. And what I find most interesting is, one, the taste column. You can see that the lowest tasting, the bitter flavor they reported on some of the Orahona, or excuse me, I should not say Orahona because Orahona tastes great to me, the Hylocereus polyrhizis. So I did notice that, but they also had some higher scores like 2.6, 2.9, which I find interesting. And you can see how they've labeled them. So in addition, you can see on Spicy Exotics website, if I search Hylocereus polyrhizis, I can look and find about a dozen ones with that family or also the DNA inside it. So that was a great first step, and I'll have to kind of inspired me to want to show you some of these plants up close because I have just about all of them and more. So anyways, back to the Israeli research. As you can see, I saved a few of these pages to share with you. And this one they called, I like to look at it by this page number, 4009. And this one just looks more round, kind of like a Hylocereus costarricensis a bit. They are kind of share some of the same genetics, I believe, or they're similar. So I found that interesting. This one did not have a very high taste, reported 1.5. Now this one, 4010, is a bit different, more round. Growth looks a little bit different, but still has a lot of similarities in this grouping. And 4010 was one of the sweeter ones, reported 2.4, so it looked like they liked it more, versus this one, which was one of the bitter ones. So this one was reported bitter. You could see it's got a lot of seeds, or it's darker. And I know that George Emerich Jr. I've seen some photos of his fruit, and he had some darker polyrhizas like this too. So I expect something like that. Now I did also notice the flower bud looks different. If you notice up here, it's a little bit different than other ones that have flowered in my experience. Now this one is another bitter one that they reported. So that flower bud's kind of a teardrop shaped again. Interesting note, I thought. And versus this one, look at how the flower bud's kind of more open already. It just doesn't say closed as much as that one I showed you before. So that was something I noticed and found very interesting based off of this data. And this one, 4013, actually was the highest rated fruit flavor. And as you can see, it looks very, very similar to the one that I picked a bit early and showed you earlier. It is a bit more that pinkish, or I should say purplish color. It's hard to describe. It's just not as red as some of the other varieties. In addition, look at the shape of the bracts and the shape of the fruit down here. It's kind of oblong is a way to describe it. So I think I have something very similar to this one. All the characteristics kind of match up, and I find this very, very helpful and useful. Now, in addition, I saw that this next one, 4080, which is at the end of their kind of overall presentation of this data, was also rated high in flavor. And this one kind of reminds me a bit of Orahona, which is another variety of Hylocereus polyrhizis that tastes excellent in my opinion. So that's what it kind of looks like to me. But you could see the differences of just some of these fruit in this family, Hylocereus polyrhizis. So that's kind of where I am in this research, and you can see I think that this is pretty helpful, and I really like researching this, and I find it enjoyable. But if you have any information that you could add to teach me something about Hylocereus polyrhizis, I would appreciate it.
Good morning, this is Paul, and today I'm going to give you a little update on what I've been working on the past week or so. So as you can see here, I just got this trellis built yesterday for Godzilla, and what I like to do is use 4-inch drain pipe and about 150 pounds of concrete. So it's actually 2 feet underground there, in addition to what you see here. Now the height is exactly 4 feet, and I've had these plants since August 1st. So you can see it's been, what, 4 months? About, and Godzilla is really taking off. I have 2 cuttings, and I like to plant them on the side here. Whoa, a little close to a peach tree. I kind of broke my rule of 10-foot spacing, but I really wanted Godzilla close to me. I didn't want it farther down the hill. So you can see, after 4 months, Godzilla had a lot of roots and is just doing great. So I still have to add one more piece of bamboo here. I got to split it for that piece. And I used to put them on the opposing wire pieces as well, but I don't do that anymore. I just train the bamboo to stay on train the dragon fruit to stay on the bamboo. So that's what I like to do. In addition, you can see, ooh, I've left my tool out there. I should grab that. So in addition, you can see that I've been starting to work on some more George Emerich Jr.'s plants. I've been keeping them nice and tied up onto the bamboo stakes, and I continue to pot some of these and trellis them up, and time will tell what they become. Now last, I just got these in as well, so you can kind of see the difference. With George Emerich Jr.'s, I'm using those fence posts, the T-shaped, and they're not as good as a proper trellis, but they should work pretty well, at least until I can evaluate the plants for fruit. Good morning, this is Paul, and today we're going to do a 6-month update on George Emerich Jr.'s plants, or cuttings we have. 48 of them. So I moved them up here to get more sunlight and hopefully get some winter growth, because we've had a really mild winter in Southern California, most likely due to or related to the La Nina. And the problem here is one variety got a little bit of cold damage, as you can see here. That's pumice there. It's not like mold or anything. I dropped it. You can see this is just going to kind of spread. It's going to continue to yellow and damage more of the young, tender cutting. So what I did is I cut it at a 45-degree angle, and then I applied some hydrogen peroxide. So that's what I like to do. It tends to hopefully stop that yellowing or that bacteria. And then I'm going to move this one because it's probably a bit more sensitive to get less sunlight and hopefully less cold. I'll probably go put it in the greenhouse. Now, here's some other really interesting updates. First I'm showing you here is that I found some archives, and back in 1997, George Emerich Sr. had a huge undatus, and they were questioning self-fertility. Now you can see that George Emerich Sr. replied, and he seemed very humble, and it really backs the friendship that he had with Paul Thompson. And then fast forward to 2004, I came across that George Sr. himself had self-fertile hybrids in just a span of 7 years. So that makes me really wonder, what about George Emerich Jr.? You can see here he's with his cat, Salt. I wonder what he created, because he was really eclectic from what I've heard and did some unique hybridizations. In fact, you could see that Paul Thompson received 12 hybrid seedlings from him, and 2 survived. And Paul Thompson noticed that there was frost sensitivity to polyrhizis and hybrids. So currently you saw that rot. There's one more down the hill with a really minor rot. I'm not going to show you that today. It's going to do fine. I'll probably just go cut it out and add some hydrogen peroxide, do the same thing. But here is one of his polyrhizis, and you can see there's just a lot of winter growth this time of year. This one is interesting because it's not turning any, it doesn't have the blue powder like some of his other varieties. So I find this one really interesting. You can see it was really atoliated, and it wasn't doing so well when we got these 3-year-old cuttings. But you can see that even though it was atoliated, the new growth is just dominating. This thing's getting huge. So let me go show you a few more of his that I've put up some temporary trellising as well. So let's go check that out. So this is how I'm assessing them in a 15-gallon pot with a 6-foot steel post wrapped in burlap. And I placed a couple of them under this large fig tree, which is nice because it's deciduous, so it will lose its leaves in the winter. So this gets plenty of sunlight, and then I'll get some sun protection in the summer. And this is a different polyrhizis that's producing a lot more of that bluish tint, as you can see here. So I find it extremely interesting how George Emerich Jr. had 15 or so, 17 of these polyrhizis, and the variability of them. I'm convinced that some of them are as hybrids that he was competing with Paul Thompson, as I discussed earlier. But time will tell, we'll see. So I like this method, and I don't think it's going to be permanent, but we'll see. All right, let me go show you some more. So here are George's plants that prefer a bit more shade, in my opinion, or experience. And you can see just how many I need to deal with still in trellis, but I'm really excited. I have a good idea about where I'm gonna put most of these. I'll share that with you in a minute, but I thought I'd share with you some unique traits here. Like, look at this one. It's extremely, very, very horny. Almost I thought it was rotten, but I just left it alone. You can see it has a new growth. So I find that interesting, just how horny these plants can get, yet they're still healthy and vigorous. And then here's one I think is very interesting. I think this is one of George's hybrids. Just the shape of it. I think it's a polyrhizis crossed with something. I'd guess undatus if I had to, but this one's very beautiful. So I'm interested to see what happens to this one, and it's number 10. So let me go show you where I plan to place these in my yard. So this next season, I've decided this is where I'm gonna put the rest of George's plants. So you can see it's gonna take some work. I'm gonna have to cut out some of these oleanders and some different plants, but some of the plants are gonna remain because George's dragon fruit cuttings just seem to prefer less sunlight than a lot of the other varieties I grow. So I think this space is just gonna be ideal. Now you can see it does get quite sunny over here. So I think that's about the end where I'm gonna be able to plant them anyways. This is an unknown Guatemalan my neighbor gave me. And you can see it's doing quite well. We'll see what happens with this one too. All right, give us a like and a subscribe, and hopefully next time we talk about George's plants, we'll have some in this beautiful space. Good morning, this is Paul, and I want to do an update on Hylocereus broxensis blue. This is definitely not broxensis blue. However, I think George has it in his collection. This is number 3. So let's talk about, or let me share with you everything I've learned about Hylocereus broxensis blue. So as you can see, according to Paul Thompson's book, it's of a known origin. It's described as having a thick stem, grayish green color, wavy, horny. Its areoles are 2 to 3 centimeters apart, and there are 10 spines that turn brown with age. In addition, they describe as it resembling Hylocereus ocamponus. Now, Matt's landscaping has very similar information. In addition, you can see he describes as having short segments, and the new growth is a dark green. Now, my friend got a cutting years ago from this source, as you can see, but they've never showed a photo of their plant, or their cuttings, I guess you could say. But I have seen it, and it definitely backs up as what we've talked about so far. Now, this source is the one that I used earlier in the video, and I think it's wrong. But the funny thing is I think I have all 3. So here's the wrong one from that last source that you just saw. And it will turn blue, I'm convinced. I saw the mother plant, it will turn blue in age, but this is definitely not matching the characteristics. You can see it's dark olive green, and I'll even show you, you can see that the new growth is very, very bronzish red. So this thing is definitely unique, but it is not broxensis blue. But I believe here, George Emerich Jr.'s plant number 3 is. You can see it looks most similar to some actual photos and videos that I've seen of real broxensis blue. You can see the number of the spines. It's horny. It's very 3-sided and flat. So I'm very excited to see how this grows out. In addition, typical ocamponus traits, you can see it's getting some new growth down here, right at the base. And I've given a few pieces of this out to my friends, and it's doing the same thing. So very similar traits on this one. Now, I don't know what this is. It's not producing the same color. It's definitely a different color if you compare these two, but the structures are very similar. So it's possible George created a hybrid of it. I don't know, but this thing is very, very slow to grow. It's the only one of George's hybrids that is rooted, or plants I should say, that is rooted and has no growth. So this is definitely looking very similar, but you can see there are some differences too. So it's pretty frustrating when something is labeled. As you can see, this one was labeled broxensis blue at the nursery, and it's definitely wrong. But I'm still excited to see what becomes of it. So there you go. I hope this helps. This is everything I've found out or known or been able to find online about broxensis blue. It's a stunning variety. It's going to grow very slow. And if you want to grow this, you better be patient. Good morning, this is Paul, and today we're going to do an 8-month update on George Emerich Jr.'s plants. Now you can see here, this is number 3. Definitely very unique with ocamponus-like traits, and it's blue. It's much more blue than other ones. So I find number 3 and another one, 15, looks similar to this, but more lime green. And they're very, very unique. So it's finally got some new growth here. I've given it
a few cuttings to friends, so they're gonna see how it grows for them as well. Now, in addition, you can see I've trellised several temporarily. So I'm using palm trees, and I'm also using some 7-foot metal T-posts, and I hammer them into the ground about 3 feet. And so those seem to be doing quite well, and those are the bigger ones of George's. And they're just doing fine this winter. I mean, it's been a mild winter, nothing too spectacular or too cold or too extreme. But you can see I still have to plant several more, at least 24 more, maybe closer to 30, I hate to say. But you can see there's been a little bit of damage on some of the new growth. So this is most likely an undatus, and it's just a bit more sensitive. So the new growth got rotted out from the cold. But you can see the rest of the plant's doing fine. So I've had about 5 that had that damage overall, which is pretty minor, but it has been a mild winter, like I said. So you can see just all the plants, these are the upper 20s and 30s here that I've numbered. And let me go show you the ones that I've put along the fence as temporary trellising so I can evaluate them. So let me go show you those. So here's what I've been working on this winter in a different part of the yard, and I've separated them every 10 feet. So these are all George's plants. I'm putting them in number order just to keep track of them. And I may put some other ones here to evaluate them. It's a nice partial sun environment. And I have numbers 3 through 14 down here. So at least I've gotten those trellised up. And I'm excited to see how they grow along this fence. I have had to plant another tree here to make some more shade. It's a bit too sunny. And you can see that in time, they're just gonna take over this fence. Here's number 12. And do great here. You can see I've used those 7-foot posts again, hammered them into the ground. And then I'm using 100-pound UV rated wire. So I've had no trouble with plants rotting. Some of my other plants here, you can see they're doing fine after almost 2 years of being along the fence, getting quite big. So there you go. I'm interested to see if more of George's plants will fruit this season. I expect them to, so I can evaluate them and try to figure out what on earth Mr. Emerich Jr. had in his collection. Good morning, fellow dragon fruit growers. This is Paul, and I wanted to do a quick episode on what I do when my dragon fruit are getting too tall above the trellis. Well, you can see I have one as an experiment where I'm letting it just climb up a palm tree. Scott gave it to me, and you can see it grew last season like, I don't know, 12 feet, 13 feet, maybe 14. It's really tall. So that's not ideal. So what I like to do in this case, you can see that this is one of George Emerich Jr.'s plants. This is number 1, actually. Some type of polyrhizis, similar to Orahona, but a bit different. But what I like to do is, look, I'm just gonna see if I can get a good angle at it there in the light. So what I like to do is I just like to break off the tip. There. And over here I have another one. You can see it's getting out of my reach. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna break off that tip again. Let's get a good picture of it in focus there. I'm just gonna break that tip off. There. So just like that, that's it. And now this branch will eventually shoot out more branches to the sides, and it shouldn't go up any higher because I can't honestly reach much above that, as you can see. So I'm trying to train it and promote it to grow down. Here's the little branch you can see. So that's all I remove, just with my fingers. But you can see I'm trying to train it to grow down like this. So this is ideal. I should get some fruit here in the next season or 2 on this lovely large plant. So there you go. That's what I do. I just try to keep everything within my reach. So that way, if I need to pollinate or if I need to prune or anything else, I can go ahead and do it without needing a ladder. Good morning, gardeners. This is Paul, and today I'm going to do a 10-month update on George Emerich Jr.'s plants. Now this one is one of the most interesting ones. It's number 3. I call it GE number 3 for now. And I've given away a few pieces to some friends just to see what happens. You can see it's definitely a unique looking color, unlike any other variety that I have here in the collection. So it took about 8 months for that graft to really start taking off. And again, that color is just so interesting. It's hard to see in the lighting. Really beautiful looking dragon fruit plant. Now here is number 3. And I took the piece off of this tip here. You can see, similar to, has some Ocamponus traits. It likes to turn blue, and new growth is at the base. Some Ocamponus can be red. It's also green. But these spines are what are so interesting in the shape. And then in time, it's just very triangular, thick, and an interesting blue color. Very slow to grow though. See this color? So definitely a very interesting variety, but slow to grow. George Emerich Jr. number 3. And then here's number 15, which is even slower. So I'm gonna graft a piece of this very soon to a nice robust rootstock like I did with this one. So hopefully we could get some life out of number 15, some new growth, so we could get a better understanding of what it just might be like this one. Now if you know what this one might be, please hit us up in the comments. Could it be Panama? I'm not sure. All right, let me go show you some more of George's plants. Now here's another interesting one. This is number 16. You can see it looks like some type of hybrid. I would guess a polyrhizis cross, maybe with one of his sweet whites. And I'm temporarily trellising them up while I evaluate them using these 7-foot metal posts wrapped in burlap. It seems to be working pretty well, and it's a more economical way to trellis these temporarily until I can figure out if any of them are repeats. And I may not ever be able to figure that out. But this one is definitely something unique, as you can see. So I wonder what George Emerich Jr. was up to. Can't wait to see what this fruit looks like. All right, let me go show you some more. Here's number 47. So I have several under this fig tree here. Here's number 45. And hopefully we'll get some fruit out of it this season. It's definitely taken off. It seems really happy and healthy. Now I have some more over here that I still need to support and provide trellises. And several of them appear to be white-fleshed varieties. You can see these are getting a little bit too much sun, starting to yellow. So I'm gonna pull them around the corner here so they'll do a bit better, like these ones over here. So here's several more George's plants. You can see they just seem really happy and healthy in this location. But I am gonna provide them a nice 7-foot metal post so I can evaluate these plants and keep them separated and happy. So it's been a little overwhelming to have 48 of his plants, well 47, one is an epiphyllum. But I'm excited to see what these become. So there you go, there's 10 months into some of George's plants. Give us a like and a subscribe. Have yourself a wonderful day. Good morning, fellow gardeners. This is Paul, and let's do a 1-year update on George Emerich Jr.'s plants. Now you can see here, 1 year ago, we got 48 cuttings for free from friends of the late George Emerich Jr. And in just one short year, look at this. This is number 1. Some sort of polyrhizis, but it's definitely different than any orahona or things that I have already. It's very beautiful, and it's a prolific bloomer. You can see here, it's beautiful flowers. So this is number 1. So we've already set 2 fruit. Decent size, they should be ready in about 10 to 15 days. And a lot of growth here, you can see. Has aborted a few flower buds, but we're gonna get to taste some fruit this season, that's for sure. Just kind of happens here. All right, let me go show you the other 47, or most of them at least. Okay, on the left here is number 2, and it's either an undatus or I think it's actually his hybrid, one of his hybrids. But we'll see. We have a fruit that's set, so time will tell. And this one was a bit slow to start this season, but now you can see it's really, really taking off. So this is number 2. All right, let's go check out number 3. So number 3 has been moved around a bit, and I think it has some Ocamponus traits. It's really, really unique looking, kind of bluish. And what I did here is I grafted it as well. So here's the graft, and sadly I dropped it twice, of course, so it got a hole, and then I went ahead and tipped it here to see what's going to happen and gave it more sunlight. So we'll see what happens, especially with the differences between grafted and ungrafted, but this is a very, very unique looking plant. This is a GE number 3. Okay, so numbers 4 through 24 kind of wrap around here in order. So let's just head down there and go see some of the interesting ones. Now someday I'll make this a trail, I hope. But you can see I kind of have them temporary here to evaluate them better and see what they become. Now the most interesting ones, probably going to be I think 17 over here. 16 actually. 17 has a flower bud. And notice how all the polyrhizis are first to produce flower. So interesting note that polyrhizis are one of the more faster producing dragon fruit varieties. But this is another hybrid of his, I think that's polyrhizis hybrid. Coloring, very, very interesting plant. This one is number 16. So hopefully we'll get fruit from that one next year. Now again, they do wrap around in order. So 4, 5, 6, and 7 are along the fence. Keep going. 15's down on the right. It's a lot like number 3. And I have a few grafts here in between. There's some more polyrhizis from George. This one is number 8. So a lot of growth. He really liked polyrhizis. Several different ones that are definitely different. And then down under this beautiful plant here, here's number 9 with a flower bud. Again, polyrhizis, notice that. And here's a few of my hybrids I just put in between to grow for the summer. Number 10. Number 11, which is interesting. It's taking a lot of sunlight. And 12. Now let me go show you where most of the rest of them are. This one is definitely an undatus. So here's 25. 24 is behind me. Nothing special right now. 25 does have a flower bud. I'm gonna kind of let it grow on top of this fence and on top of this vine here of Morning Glory. I have several more over here. It's at 26 on the palm tree. 27 through 35 along here, as you can see. And they don't quite get enough sun here, but these ones happen to be more sensitive, sun-sensitive varieties. And I'm gonna actually just thin out the plant that's making all the shade, the honeysuckle. So that's my plan, but they have plenty of new growth. They're doing fine. and they just continue on. So this is the 30s row, and I still need to plant some more of them and give them some more support, but they're doing fine here. I'm gonna just have them under some other plants. Now up in the 40s are a few more interesting ones. Well, let me go show you those. I need to build this one a support trellis, but it's just so much time and effort. All right, let me go show you the last ones. Good thing I didn't miss this. This is number 39 with a nice flower bud. I'm gonna guess that this is a white-fleshed one. And then in the 40s, I still again need to support these with trellises. But the plan is to let them kind of grow under these plants or with these plants until I can evaluate them. Up to 41 now. And let me go show you the last ones. So here's 46. Another polyrhizis with that flower bud. So here are some in the 40s. The one with the flowers is number 45. Beautiful flower bloom. And a couple more in the 40s, just growing. All right, let me go show you number 47 and 48. So here's 47, kind of growing on this interesting spot. Had a bloom on the rock. And it's doing pretty well here. It's got one more flower bud. But I definitely think some of these are repeats, especially the polyrhizis. But there's also several with unique traits. So we'll see what happens in time. All right, let me go show you the last one, number 48. And last but not least, number 48. It's definitely a polyrhizis and the longest rooting that cutting that I've ever rooted. You can see how long it is. It's at least 8 feet, maybe 10. And it did produce one fruit here, or one flower that I cross-pollinated. And I will say that it doesn't quite get enough sunlight here, but it did produce the flower. But I'm gonna cut down the big olive tree behind me, or at least prune it out to give this thing some more sunlight. So there you go. There's most of what's going on with George Emerich Jr.'s collection. Give us a like and a subscribe. Thanks for your time. And we'll continue to assess these beautiful plants and see what they, hopefully find out what they are. All right, take care. Thanks for watching.